Another top-level military officer confirming what most Americans are already starting to believe: aliens do exist.
Non-human intelligence exists. Non-human intelligence has been interacting with humanity. This interaction is not new, and it's been ongoing.
Well, a retired U.S. Army colonel going on the record insisting aliens are real and already communicating with humans. It's the focus of the latest episode of News Nation's new podcast, Reality Check with Ross Coulthart. If you grab your phone, do it. Okay, come on, grab your phone, come to your screen. There's a QR code. It'll take you directly to the podcast, or you can also check News Nation's website or our YouTube page. And joining me now is News Nation's special correspondent, Ross Coulthart. Good morning. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning, Anna.
So I have to admit, this is not my zone of genius. When we hear non-human intelligence, is that just synonymous with aliens?
It is. It's another cute word for alien. And the interesting thing is the person saying this, the very senior former Army officer, Colonel Carl Nell, I mean, he's a chap who's advised people at the very top of the U.S. Army. He's advised as a senior advisor to the U.S. Army Combatant Command. He's also worked in helping reorganize the U.S. Army Reserves, the biggest restructure since the 1970s. And intriguingly, Anna, he's also worked for some of the aerospace companies, Northrop Grumman, Lockheed Martin, Bell Labs. He knows stuff, particularly because he's the former director of the UAP task force. He investigated unidentified anomalous phenomena for the Pentagon, and he's saying a non-human intelligence is real, and furthermore, it's been interacting with humanity for a very long time.
Yeah, and for the skeptics out there, this is not a guy in some tinfoil hat. This is not some slouch. We can add a retired colonel with the U.S. military to the long list of other credible witnesses publicly saying there is non-human life out there. So at what point will enough be enough and the government just shares what they know? Are they hiding something? And if so, why?
Look, I think the government does know it's hiding stuff. Even very senior figures like Christopher Mellon, a former Deputy Undersecretary of Defense, has admitted that the US government, he believes, is hiding things about UAPs. And more importantly, Colonel Nell's comments have been backed by a former admiral in the US Navy, Tim Gallaudet. He's talked about how, quote, I know Colonel Nell is correct with complete certainty. Why has society not taken this world-changing reality seriously, he says? Partly because of a deliberate and systematic disinformation campaign by the US government, which has perpetuated the stigma associated with UAP. So he's had some high-powered support from a former colleague in the services.
Right, and you obviously have done a real deep dive into this. So what if we lived in a world where the Pentagon decided they're going to officially admit that there's proof out there of UFOs and UAPs? What would happen next?
Look, I don't think the public would be that shocked, to be honest. I think there are a lot of very patronizing, haughty people in both private aerospace and parts of the defense and intelligence community who think that you and I and the public can't cope with this news and information. I think we can, and I think it's time that the Pentagon, the president, and indeed the intelligence community were far more candid about what they really know.
Look, some of our top-rated content is on this very subject. There's obviously a lot of interest out there. And again, you can check out Ross Coulthart. You can check our website, our YouTube page, or his brand new podcast, Reality Check with Ross Coulthart. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Hello, and thank you for joining this edition of Reality Check. Now, let's have a think about what we all fantasize about in this UAP UFO subject. All we really want is for somebody in the know to stand up somewhere on a stage and tell it like it really is, spill his guts, reveal all, and we can all go home and get on with our lives. Well, to some degree, that's what a lot of people are saying Colonel Nell did, the former director of the UAP task force for the Pentagon, when he stood up on stage in New York City in front of the SALT conference attendees on the 21st of May.
Here's the million-dollar question. Do you believe that a higher form of non-human intelligence has visited this planet?
Right. So non-human intelligence exists. Non-human intelligence has been interacting with humanity. This interaction is not new, and it's been ongoing. And there are unelected people in the government that are aware of that.
It was an extraordinary admission that made everybody sit up and take notice. Under questioning from Alex Clokus, when Carl was asked about his views on non-human intelligence, he said, quote, "Non-human intelligence exists. Non-human intelligence has been interacting with humanity. This interaction is not new, and it's been ongoing. There are unelected people in the government that are aware of this." And then Alex asked him, "How confident are you that this is true?" Quick as a flash, he responded, "There is zero doubt."
Carl, that is quite a bold statement. I'm wondering, and I'm curious, how confident are you that that is true?
There's zero doubt.
That was the moment. That was one of the most fun moments in the last few years, to see somebody who clearly knows all, somebody who's cleared for top secret SCI material, telling it like it really is. So Colonel Carl, we doffs our hat to you. And it's not just any bloke we're talking about here. Colonel Carl, if he'd stayed in the military, would likely have become a brigadier general. This is one very senior US Army officer. He's ex-US Army Space Command, ex-Northrop Grumman, ex-Lockheed Martin, ex-Bell Labs, ex-CTO for a $2 billion company, a former Reserve Army Brigade commander, a former senior advisor to the Vice Chief of Staff of the Army, a Deputy Chief of Staff to the Combatant Command, the man who advised Army Futures Command on the reorganisation of the Army Reserves, the largest since the 1970s, and a former director of the Pentagon's UAP task force. This is one high-powered bloke. I first met Carl late last year at the Seoul conference, and then earlier on this year in Washington, D.C. He's a very softly spoken, calm guy, and you can see how he developed his qualities of leadership. He's a very impressive guy. One of the things that we can explore is the issue that he's being criticised for, because a lot of people across social media, the usual suspects, are saying, where's the evidence? They're suggesting it's all a big yawn, that what he said really wasn't anything new, and to some degree, they're right. It wasn't anything new. What Colonel Nell said has been said by Lou Elizondo, David Grush, and Chris Mellon, and many others. It was the way he said it. It was the clear resolve and the fact that he obviously had a prepared statement that made it very, very clear he was ready for the question and he wanted to make a point. It's interesting also to note that Colonel Nell was one of the primary sources for Leslie Kean and Ralph Blumenthal's original news story that broke the David Grush allegations and backed the veracity of the David Grush allegations, citing themselves as first-hand witnesses. It's very, very clear that Colonel Nell knows a lot that he can't talk about publicly. And this is why this whole debate about, oh, where's the evidence, where's the data, is very, very stupid, because the people asking those questions know full well that Colonel Nell is a patriot, just like all of these insiders. They don't want to recklessly breach their national security oaths. They're bound by the constraints of their top secret SCI clearances. Now, that doesn't mean that the story is never going to get told. What it means, though, is that there has to be a controlled narrative to what we, the public, get told. Now, I hate that as much as you do. I'm a journo. I want to find things out and dig up secrets. And if I can, I will. But people like Colonel Nell are not in a position to be able to say publicly why they know what they know. So Colonel Nell was copping a lot of stick for citing the former Canadian Defence Minister, Paul Hellyer, and the former Israeli space agency boss Haim Eshed for saying that this is why there is data, this is why he believes what he says. And I don't believe for a moment that that's the basis for his belief. I think he ducked past, and Alex kind of let him off the hook by not following up with another question, which is, do you have first-hand knowledge? What knowledge do you personally have that has informed you as to why you know that NHI are engaging with humanity and have been doing so for a very long time? There are hints. That biography I read you was a biography that Carl himself gave to the SALT conference. But when I went back and had a look at his LinkedIn, prompted by a very kind member of the audience here, I noticed what my audience friend had pointed out, which is that Carl didn't mention one period of service he had right back in the early 2000s when he was working for DIA, the Defence Intelligence Agency, as a Tech Int operations officer. And whilst he was working for Operation Iraqi Freedom in the Middle East, he was in charge, or he was one of the people planning with the so-called Foreign Material Program. And he served as the J2, which is essentially the primary intelligence officer, for the one-star Combined Joint Captured Materiel Exploitation Center, the JCMEC, in Iraq. Now that's quite significant to me because the FMP, the Foreign Material Exploitation Program, is where I'm hearing a lot of this alleged retrieval operation internationally is being conducted with America's Five Eyes allies, including Australia, New Zealand, Canada and the UK. When there is allegedly a retrieval of some kind of exotic technology, be it foreign adversary or something else, quite often allies like Australia, the UK, Canada and New Zealand are called in to assist. And that's where I thought it was very telling that the Foreign Material Program is something on Carl Nell's CV that he didn't mention to SALT.
This current cycle happened last December with the Schumer amendment, and then it got rolled back. It was defeated in the House. And so it remains to be seen, if the process is going to continue. One hopes and can maybe draw a little bit of confidence that maybe this will come around is the colloquy that Senator Schumer and Senator Rounds had back in December. After their amendment got killed, they basically went on the Senate floor and articulated their rationale for the legislation. And I think Senator Schumer, to quote him, almost said it was a travesty that this did not pass.
The United States government has gathered a great deal of information about UAPs over many decades, but has refused to share it with the American people. We've also been notified by multiple credible sources that information on UAPs has also been withheld from Congress, which, if true, is a violation of the laws requiring full notification to the legislative branch.
Not everything that we wanted, but we'll continue to move forward and find additional transparency.
So this is, a bipartisan colloquy on a topic that I guess most people would probably consider fringe, and yet these two senators felt the need to do that and to double down on their desire to see this through.
Yeah.
So hopefully we'll see maybe a reintroduction of some version of that this summer with the goal of maybe putting it into the NDAA by the end of the year.
One of the other things I think we should talk about is the fact that what came out of Colonel Nell's speech to SALT was that he's intimating that there's going to be another tilt at bringing the Schumer Amendment, the key protections for whistleblowers who want to come forward about UAPs. He wants another go at getting that Schumer Amendment before the Congress into the NDAA, the National Defence Authorization Act, before the end of the year. And he's not saying categorically that he thinks we are going to see disclosure. In fact, he said quite wearily and resignedly to Alex, this sort of disclosure emphasis has come and gone over time. And so this is not the first time we've arrived at this stage. He said, I would suggest that maybe the peak of this current cycle happened last December with the Schumer Amendment, and then it got rolled back and was defeated in the House. And so it remains, he said, to be seen if the process is good to continue. I think that's an admission that we really are at a crunch point here. Mike Turner, the congressman from Ohio, very successfully nobbled with a group of House representatives attempts to bring the Schumer amendment through the House late last year. And this, I think, stalled attempts to get UAP disclosure before the key oversight committees such as the Senate Select Committee for Intelligence and the Senate Armed Services Committee and the HASC, the House Armed Services Committee. There is a very determined cadre of politicians in those committees who I do think, if they know that they've got witnesses coming forward who feel safe about speaking out as whistleblowers, they will do so. And this is why the Schumer amendment matters. And frankly, it's why the squawking and ranting from the critics out there who say, where's the evidence? Bring us the data. Colonel Nell's evidence wasn't anything new. They don't matter a jot. They're irrelevant to the debate because it's not us, the public, out here that have to be convinced. It's Congress. It's Congress that has to be swayed. What needs to happen right now is key opinion leaders in the Congress need to be convinced that there is sufficient evidence to justify what we hope might be a kind of church committee style public inquiry where the people responsible for this program, the gatekeepers of the legacy retrieval and reverse engineering program, can be summoned under oath and compelled to give evidence before the Congress in a public hearing, just like the CIA was held to account right back in the 1970s, 50 years ago. This is really important stuff, and I think the arguments we're seeing about whether or not Carl Nell said much at all, whether or not he provided any data, are really ridiculous and absurd, because the people making those criticisms know full well Nell's a patriot, as are Mellon, Elizondo, Grush and everybody else who's intimating that they are aware of first-hand knowledge about this program. They can't speak about it publicly because they know it's tied up in a litany of orchestrated lies, secrets tied up with a bow and NDAs inside the Pentagon and the intelligence community and also out in private aerospace. This is a secret that wants to be kept. And the only way that it can be revealed is if Congress is compelled to do its job. And that's why you out there matter. Your voters. For God's sake, just get out there and tell your congressman and senator that this matters.
Carl, I mean, what you're saying is extremely consequential, and you've referenced other people that have said the same thing that also have similar credibility. There's similar reasons for why we should believe many of these folks, yet the government itself has not formally disclosed. They've been very reluctant to do that. Why? Why do you think that is?
So there's 6 basic reasons, and this, again, you could draw this out from first principles. There's a national security reason. There's the lack of a plan. There's the potential for societal disruption. There's the possibility that there's some non-public agreement. There's the potential for misdeeds and the desire to cover up misdeeds. And there's just the basic organizational intransigence and lack of priority that might be associated with the topic. So all these things are factors.
Before we go, the other thing I thought was really pertinent from what Colonel Nell talked about were what he cited as the reasons for non-disclosure versus the reasons for disclosure. And the reasons for non-disclosure included national security, keeping the knowledge from adversaries, protecting people from themselves. What a patronizing label that would be. Lack of a credible plan, the idea that NHI intentions remain unknown, and the idea also that new physics and technologies have unpredictable ramifications. I actually think the pro-disclosure argument is a slightly warped version of that, which is my increasing suspicion is that the United States has developed these technologies to such a point that they feel they have a technological advantage, and that by revealing even the existence of NHI, it's a slippery slope. And that what we'll see eventually is a forced disclosure, a catastrophic disclosure of the fact that the US is in possession of technology that it thinks might give it an advantage in any future conflict with a foreign adversary. The other arguments pro non-disclosure were societal disruption, which again I think is patronizing. I think we're well over that. My daughter's generation is well aware and very interested and engaged in the UAP subject. They're not frightened at all by the possibility of a non-human intelligence. So I think that creepy idea that we're also religious or we're also conservative and we can't bear the idea of actually having to deal with the concept of NHI is patronising, irrelevant and old-fashioned. The other one that I thought was very interesting was when Coulthart talked about the possibility that there might be covert agreements with NHI, unaccountable parties advancing unknown agendas, the idea that disclosure will precipitate or accelerate negative repercussions, and that there might be a quid pro quo from the NHI itself. It's not the first time people have talked from the inside about agreements, covert agreements. You might remember in my interview with David Grush a year ago, he acknowledged that there was, in his DOPSA, talk of agreements, but he was very, very vague. He didn't want to talk much at all on camera about what that all meant. Interesting. Put that one in your top pocket. And the final two that I think are also very significant against disclosure are cover for misdeeds. The idea that there would be significant criminal misconduct or violation of civil liberties revealed, or the idea that there would be revelations of an unequitable accrual of power, privilege, or monetary gain. I think there's a lot to that. I think, frankly, it combines with the final point that Cole made, which is organisational intransigence. The Pentagon, the intelligence community are obdurate bureaucracies. They're not moved easily. It's much, much easier to bury a secret than to admit one, especially when it's stinky. Now, the pros for disclosure gave me a smile on my face. Ultimately, it's quite clear where Colonel Nell lies. He talked about the moral right and ultimately how NHI existence is ultimately not government information, that the pursuit of happiness requires knowledge of the world as it is, and that government is for the people, not the reverse, and that it's time to restore proper oversight and accountability and redress misdeeds. He also warned about the importance of avoiding catastrophic disclosure, that essentially all the reasons that have been cited in the anti-disclosure will fall in a heap if, as appears increasingly likely, this whole story is going to spill out into the open anyway, and these people will be dragged in chains out onto the forecourt of the Congress and held to account for their crimes and misdeeds. And then there's also the point that Cole made, which is the prevention of a loss of technological dominance. The idea that, again, I increasingly hear from people on the inside that one of the things that is constraining our ability to understand this technology is the fact that the way we are doing the research, the way we are doing the science inside this legacy program is completely antithetical to good science. Scientists love to be able to share ideas, to swap ideas, to have their papers peer-reviewed and criticised. That's how humanity will make advances. Imagine if a government came out with a controlled disclosure, a measured disclosure, and said, yes, there is NHI. It's real. It has shared technology with us. But we are not going to tell you the detail of what that is, because to do so might give evil people, bad people, potential foreign adversaries, an advantage that we don't want them to have. I actually think that's a perfectly reasonable argument. And wouldn't it be wonderful if we could have a collaboration like the Manhattan Project that finally cracks this technology once and for all? I suspect that's where Colonel Coulthart lies. And full marks to him, I doff my hat to him. The man is a patriot. He showed great courage by speaking on the stage the way he did, and so does every other insider who's spoken out publicly. We should back them and we should support them. That's all for Reality Check this week. I'm doing a shortened show because I'm getting on a plane. I'm flying to Huntsville, Alabama, where the Scientific Coalition for the Studies of UAPs is having its annual conference. And I, for my sins, a journalist who believes in UFO conspiracies, no less. I'm speaking to a room full of scientists. I won't deny it's daunting, intimidating, but I promise you it's going to be fun. Thanks very much. See you next time. Thanks for watching. Go to joinnn.com to find News Nation on your television provider. And please don't forget to click that red subscribe button to ensure you get more of News Nation's unbiased and fact-driven news coverage.